My son didn't just ask me to leave, he ordered me out of my own home. "You've done enough damage, Mom. Just go." He slammed the door so hard it rattled the porch swing Robert built with his bare hands. I stood there with my suitcase, heart trembling, as neighbors peeked through their blinds. But inside my purse was a letter he hadn't seen, for Matthew, read only when I'm gone. He thought he was ending something. He didn't know. I had just started writing my legacy. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you? Watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't always the woman standing on that porch with shaking hands and a broken heart. Once, I was Linda Mayfield, wife, mother, librarian, proud owner of a home filled with laughter and the scent of fresh cinnamon rolls every Sunday morning. I grew up in a time when pride was stitched into everything you did. Your lawn, your manners, your family. I met Robert when I was just 19, fresh out of teacher's college. He was working the night shift at the steel mill, always smelling like smoke and motor oil, always smiling like he had a secret. He made me feel seen in a way no one else ever had. We bought our home with nothing but grit and a handshake loan from a kind banker. It was a modest, 2-story brick with a cherry tree in the back that bloomed like a promise every spring. Robert and I planted it the day we moved in, said we'd watch it grow as our family did. And for a while, it did. When Matthew came along, I didn't think I could love anything more. He was born with Robert's eyes, gray like thunderclouds, and from the beginning, I swore I'd give him everything we never had, and I did. I was never the type to buy luxuries, not even when we could afford them. I clipped coupons, patched Matthew's jeans at the knee, and learned how to make $1 stretch so far it nearly snapped. After Robert passed, lung cancer, 3 months from diagnosis to goodbye, I thought the pain might swallow me whole. But Matthew was still in high school. I had to keep going. I worked 2 jobs, library during the day, tutoring in the evenings. I paid off the mortgage early, never missed a bill, never asked for help. Every tax return, every bonus, every small inheritance, I tucked it away like a squirrel with winter on its mind. Not out of greed, out of love. See, I always believed Matthew was meant for more. He was smart. He had ideas. I wanted to be the silent safety net he never had to fall into, but always knew was there. So I never told him about the savings. Never told him that over the years, I'd quietly invested in a small commercial property, just a strip mall, nothing fancy, and that it had done well. By the time he graduated college, I had quietly built up over $900,000 in assets and cash. And yet, I still drove a rusted sedan and wore sweaters with years in them, because in my heart, I believed he would see past what I wore and see the legacy I'd tried to build. I thought the foundation between us was unshakable. I let him move back home after college to get on his feet. I cooked his favorite meals, asked him about his job interviews, told him how proud his father would be. I kept the house warm, even when arthritis made climbing the stairs feel like lifting concrete. I kept the cherry tree pruned, even when no one cared anymore if it bloomed. Years passed like pages turning in a forgotten book. Matthew married Kayla, a sharp woman, always dressed like she was late to a business meeting. She didn't talk much to me, and when she did, it was always polite, but cold. Still, I opened my doors again when Matthew lost his job during the tech layoffs. "Just until we get back on our feet," he said. "It won't be long." I smiled and nodded. "Of course, son, this is still your home." But it wasn't, not really. It was mine and Robert's. And slowly I started to feel like a ghost in it. First it was the living room, redecorated in sleek neutrals with modern art that looked like spilled ink. Then the kitchen, my floral curtains replaced with steel gray blinds. Kayla didn't like my old cookware, said it was unsanitary. Still, I told myself, they're stressed, they're trying. Give them time. Time, as it turned out, was the one thing I had too much of. And they They were only waiting for me to run out of it. I thought I was still the mother he remembered, the woman who once held his head when he had the flu, who stayed up nights sewing costumes for school plays. But I was wrong, and the next time he looked at me, I'd see it in his eyes. I wasn't Mom anymore. I was an inconvenience. At first, I tried to believe it was just a rough patch. Matthew had always been stubborn, even as a child. He didn't like being told what to do, didn't like being questioned, but he was never unkind. So when he and Kayla moved in, just until the severance runs out, I opened the door without hesitation. They brought boxes, dozens of them, and filled every corner of the house with noise, opinions, and change. I told myself this was temporary. But from day one, I could feel the shift. It was in the way Kayla looked around my kitchen with faint disgust, muttering, "We'll have to update this at some point." It was in how Matthew took down Robert's old baseball plaques from the hallway, saying, "Let's make this place feel more neutral." It was the way I started asking for permission in my own home. They turned the guest room into Kayla's remote office, then converted the den into a small gym. "Just until we're back on our feet," Matthew reminded me. But when I walked in one morning to find my reading chair thrown in the garage, I felt something go quiet inside me. Still, I cooked dinner every night, made space, smiled through, clenched teeth. That's what mothers do. We hold everything in, like it's our sacred duty not to rock the boat, even if we're the ones drowning under it. Kayla would come home from Pilates and toss her gym bag on the table where I once rolled cookie dough with Matthew as a boy. She'd sigh dramatically if dinner wasn't exactly to her liking. "Do you still use butter? That's not heart-healthy, Linda." I nodded and switched to olive oil. One afternoon, I came back from the grocery store to find my old floral sofa on the curb, a sleeker gray one in its place. No one asked. No one told me. I just stood there, watching two neighbors drag it away like it had no story to it. That couch had held me and Robert during his last chemo treatment. It had held Matthew, the night he cried over his first heartbreak. Kayla poked her head in from the kitchen and said, "Oh, sorry. We figured you were over that thing." It was so retro. Retro. That's what I was becoming. One evening, Matthew sat me down, not for a talk, for a plan. "We've been thinking," he said, resting a hand on my shoulder like a boss preparing to let someone go. "You shouldn't have to worry about bills anymore. Let me manage your accounts. Kayla's brother is a financial advisor. We can streamline everything." I paused. "Matthew, I've been handling my finances for 40 years. He smiled like I was a child with scissors. "I know, Mom, but things are changing now. You've done your part. Let us help. Help." It sounded like mercy, but it felt like takeover. The following week, Kayla mentioned something about long-term care planning. "You'll be comfortable, of course," she said, sipping wine from a glass that once belonged to my mother. "Maybe something near the water. A nice facility with good reviews." I blinked. "Facility?" "Oh, don't take it the wrong way," she rushed, laughing tightly. "It's just realistic." Realistic. I heard that word in my sleep after that. I tried to bring it up with Matthew, tried to reach the boy I once knew, but he brushed me off. "Stop being paranoid. You're not being fair to Kayla." Fair. As if fairness lived in silence. It was subtle at first, a new Wi-Fi password I wasn't told. Groceries I bought being replaced with cleaner versions. Family photo albums, slowly disappearing from the living room. I once asked where they were. Matthew replied, "They're not gone. We're just decluttering. You keep too much stuff around." But that stuff was my life. One afternoon, I heard Kayla on the phone. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was walking past the door. She laughed and said, "Oh, we'll have the whole house to ourselves by summer. The paperwork's already in motion." I stopped in my tracks. Paperwork? That night, I dug through the kitchen. drawer and found documents I'd never seen before, drafts of power of attorney, a trust transfer agreement, and something called a home transition strategy. I read each word slowly, like peeling back skin. They weren't helping me. They were replacing me. In my own home, I had become invisible, an obstacle to be managed, a relic to be relocated. But what they didn't know was this. I'd spent a lifetime preparing. Not for war, but for the moment I'd need to walk away without looking back. The day Matthew asked me for my banking passwords, I knew things had shifted past the point of no return. He made it sound casual, as if it were just part of helping out. You know, Mom, it's just safer if I handle the bills. You forget things sometimes. I looked at him carefully. I've never missed a payment. He smiled without meeting my eyes. Exactly. Let's keep it that way. I handed him nothing. That night, I sat in my bedroom, what used to be my bedroom, and stared at the familiar corners of a space slowly becoming unrecognizable. Kayla had already begun replacing my curtains with blackout blinds. My floral quilts were folded and stored to preserve them, she said. The walls were bare now. My wedding photo was tucked away, replaced by abstract art that meant nothing to me. The next morning, I found a cabinet in the garage filled with my keepsakes, baby books, Robert's old tools, my recipe cards. When I asked about it, Kayla shrugged. We're just reorganizing. You don't really use that stuff anymore, do you? That word again. Anymore. As if my memories had an expiration date. I tried to talk to Matthew. Really talk. I asked him to sit with me on the porch like we used to when he was a boy with scraped knees and wild dreams. I don't feel welcome. In my own home, I said softly. He sighed heavily, as if I'd burdened him. Mom, stop being dramatic. We're doing our best here. You said we could stay. You said this was our home too. But I didn't say I would disappear, I replied. He got up and left without a word. Over the next few weeks, their control tightened like a rope around my ankles. Kayla began making doctor's appointments for me without asking. Preventative care, she called it. She insisted on attending them. At first, I thought she was trying to be involved, until she asked my doctor, in front of me, if he'd noticed any cognitive decline. Cognitive decline. I sat frozen, listening to a woman 10 feet from my wedding vows question whether I could be trusted to handle my own life. After that, things escalated fast. Matthew began insisting I sign just a few papers to make things easier in case of emergencies. But the papers weren't simple. They were designed to give him complete control of my finances, including my retirement accounts, savings, and home title. When I refused, his voice changed. I'm trying to protect you, but you're making it impossible. From what? I asked. He didn't answer. One Sunday, I came back from church to find my bedroom furniture rearranged. Half of it was gone. My dresser, which Robert had built with his own hands, was sitting in the garage again. Kayla said, "We're thinking of turning that room into a nursery. You can move into the downstairs room. It's more accessible for someone your age." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a removal. I walked upstairs and sat on the edge of my stripped bed. I was trembling, not with rage, but with clarity. I was no longer living in my house. I was surviving in theirs. I called my friend Elaine that night. She and I met at the library years ago, both retired, both widowed, both quiet, in the same way women learn to be after life has wrung them out and left them wiser. She came by the Yaiki, next day with warm tea and eyes full of knowing. "I've seen this before," she said gently. "They're not just ungrateful, they're rewriting the story and erasing you from it." That evening, I took a long look around the house. I touched the banister Robert sanded smooth one summer. I ran my fingers along the frame of Matthew's old height chart, still marked in pencil on the hallway wall. I stared at the cherry tree, now old and twisted, still blooming out back. and I made a quiet decision. I began gathering documents, insurance papers, investment statements, deeds, legal records. I called a lawyer and updated my will. I made sure every asset was locked tight, every account secure. I quietly moved my most personal belongings to a small storage unit in town, one box at a time. I also drafted a letter, my final gift, and my last word. A week later, I overheard the final push. Kayla on the phone again, unaware I was behind the me-bye door. She's resisting, but we'll be done with her soon. Once she's out, we can refinance everything. Refinance. That's when I knew the timeline had accelerated. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were planning to remove me while I was still alive. The next day, Matthew confronted me in the kitchen. "Mom, it's time. We found a place for you, assisted living, 20 minutes away. It's clean, safe, they have activities. You'll like it." He slid a brochure across the table like it was a menu. I looked up at him and said just one word: "No." His expression darkened. "You're not thinking clearly. We're trying to help." "No," I said again, steady this time. "You're trying to erase me." That night, while they slept, I finished packing my suitcase, my purse, and the letter. I slipped the envelope into Matthew's desk drawer with quiet hands and heavy breath. For Matthew, read only when I'm gone. Then I walked out without a sound. They thought I was clinging to the past, but the truth was I had already let go. They just hadn't realized I was no longer theirs to control. The walk from the house to the sidewalk was only 12 steps. 12. But it felt like a lifetime. Each step echoed with a memory, a heartbeat, a flash of the boy I used to love with. My whole chest. The one who used to fall asleep on my lap during thunderstorms. The one who couldn't go to sleep without me checking the closet for monsters, even when he was 10. The night air was cool as I closed the gate behind me, suitcase in hand. I didn't cry. Not then. My eyes had dried out weeks ago, but that doesn't mean I wasn't bleeding somewhere inside. I remember the first time Matthew got sick. He was 5, high fever, glassy eyes, limp in my arms. I sat up all night rocking, him in that floral armchair they would later throw in the garage without asking. I hummed lullabies, wiped sweat from his forehead, and whispered again and again, "You're okay. Mommy's here." And when Robert died, when the weight of single motherhood hit me like a cinder block, I didn't collapse. I couldn't. I held it together for Matthew. I got up the next morning, made his lunch, braided his hair for Crazy Hair Day because his hands were shaking too hard. He was 13, but he tried. That boy disappeared somewhere along the way. Now, in his place stood a man I didn't recognize. A man with cold eyes and smooth lies. A man who didn't think twice before dismantling the life I had built so he could feel more powerful in it. I had held on to so many memories like old photographs, faded, frayed at the edges, but precious. I remember holding Matthew's hand as we walked to his first day of kindergarten. He clung to my skirt, shy and quiet. "Don't leave yet," he'd said, eyes wide with fear. "I won't," I promised. And I didn't. Not that day, not ever, until now. Now, I was leaving. Not because I wanted to, but because he had already closed the door long before he physically slammed it shut. The night before I left, I stood in the hallway and stared at the pencil markings on the wall. Each line a year, each name scribbled beside it. Matthew, age 6. Matthew, age 8. My handwriting, my boy. I ran my fingers down the lines slowly, tracing the growth of someone I thought I knew. And then I turned and looked into the dark. In that moment, something broke, not like glass, but like rope. A slow unraveling. This was no longer my home. This was a place where I had been quietly erased. Even the air didn't know me anymore. I sat in the garden one last time. The cherry tree was blooming early, Robert would have said it was a good omen. I watched a single blossom drift down into my lap. I closed my eyes and remembered his voice. Don't let them make you smaller, Linda. You were made to hold storms in your hands. He used to say that when I felt invisible. I hadn't heard it in years, but that night it came back like it had been waiting patiently inside me. The breaking point wasn't loud. It didn't involve screaming or slamming doors. That's not how women like me fall apart. We break in silence, in forgotten hallways, in closets where old wedding dresses hang, in the absence of anyone noticing. I quietly packed 3 changes of clothes, my rosary, my mother's brooch, and a single framed photo of Robert and me, taken under the cherry tree on our 20th anniversary. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and wrote the letter. I wrote it with shaking hands, but clear thoughts. I told Matthew the truth, not out of bitterness, but out of the deep, aching love only a mother can carry even after her child has hurt her beyond recognition. I told him about the money, about the trust fund, about the properties, about the $1 million legacy he never knew existed because I had never wanted him to feel controlled or indebted. I told him how much I believed in him once, how much I still did, somewhere deep down. But that trust, like glass, once shattered, never goes back to the way it was. I told him I forgave him, but I could not forget, and I would not stay. I ended the letter with one final line. What you do with this truth now is up to you. But know this, I never stopped loving you. I only stopped living for someone who had already moved on from me. Have you ever had someone you love treat you like a stranger? Tell me your story in the comments. It matters. Sometimes sharing is the first step toward healing. They thought they'd left me behind. But in truth, I had already crossed a bridge they couldn't see. One paved in silence, stitched with sorrow, and leading toward something they would never again be invited into. My peace. The cottage was smaller than I imagined. 2 rooms, sloped, ceilings, faded wallpaper with tiny blue flowers, but it was mine. Elaine found it through a friend of a friend, quiet corner of town, just outside the city, tucked behind a row of hydrangeas. There was a creaky front porch and a narrow kitchen, but the windows let in light the way hope enters a tired heart, slowly, gently, then all at once. The first morning, I sat by the window with my coffee and realized something was missing. Noise, the constant feeling of walking on eggshells, the sound of Kayla's heels clicking across the hardwood like ownership. Here, the only sound was the rustle of wind through the trees and the occasional chirp of birds nesting near the gutters. For the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts. Elaine came by that afternoon with fresh bread and strong opinions. You look 10 years younger already, she said, pouring me tea like she'd done it 1,000 times. I smiled. Maybe I'm just finally breathing. She looked at me carefully. You know they'll try something. The moment they realize you're not coming back, that you didn't leave empty-handed, they'll push. I nodded. I'm ready. Because I was. I hadn't just walked away. I had walked towards something. In the weeks before I left, I had met quietly with a lawyer named Ms. DeWitt. Sharp eyes, gray hair, and a voice like gravel. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Do you want to preserve your assets or punish them? She asked. I paused. Neither. I want peace, but I want to make sure they don't destroy what's left of what I built. Together, we set up a series of living trusts, airtight, protected, inaccessible without my consent. I took Matthew off every account, removed him as power of attorney, and revoked his access to any joint documentation. I established a scholarship in Robert's name at the local high school, funded anonymously, for kids from single-parent households. I also donated to the community library, the same one where I had worked for 27 years and watched generations of children learn how to dream. And lastly, I rewrote my will. Matthew would receive a portion, $10,000, enough to show I hadn't abandoned him entirely. But the rest? The million plus I'd nurtured in silence? That would go to people who still knew the value of a warm meal, an honest word, and a legacy. Not measured in square footage, but in kindness. In the cottage, I found small joys again. I planted herbs in mismatched pots and set them along the windowsill. I joined a knitting circle at the church, women with soft eyes and hard-earned wisdom. I started journaling every morning before sunrise. Sometimes it was poetry, sometimes it was memory, sometimes it was grief with a pen. I was healing in the sea, most unexpected ways. Not loudly, but completely. There was a certain dignity in solitude when it's chosen, not forced. One day, I passed by a bookstore downtown and saw a little boy tugging on his grandmother's arm, asking for a dinosaur book. She laughed, bought it, and read the first page right there on the bench. I watched them from across the street and felt something tighten in my chest. Not sadness, just a deep, aching wish that love could stay innocent forever. But life doesn't work like that. Children grow up, and sometimes they forget who built the ground they now walk on. One morning, Elaine brought over a manila envelope. She had been by the house to pick up something I'd forgotten. Inside were new photographs. The living room I once loved now looked like a magazine spread, cold, sterile, modern. The cherry tree had been trimmed back to a stump. My flower beds, torn out. Even the doormat was gone. In its place, a new one that read, "The Taylor's Home." They'd renamed my life. I stared at the photos for a long time before I said anything. "I don't think he even read the letter yet," I murmured. Elaine squeezed my hand. "He will. And when he does, it'll be too late to rewrite how he treated you." That night, I lit a candle and sat quietly, letting the silence wrap around me like a quilt. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't triumph. It was peace, hard-earned, quiet, clean. While they were busy redecorating the ruins of what I gave them, I was busy rebuilding something they couldn't touch, a life of my own, stitched together with grace, strength, and the kind of love that doesn't need to be seen to survive. It didn't happen all at once. No explosions, no dramatic phone calls, just small cracks, quiet misfortunes, and a truth that had been buried beneath entitlement beginning to rise inch by inch. It started with the bank. Matthew walked in, confident and polished, ready to refinance the house in his and Kayla's name. The banker, a man I'd known for decades, flipped through the papers, frowned, then slid them back across the desk. "I'm sorry," he said. "You're not listed as the homeowner." "What do you mean?" Matthew asked, his voice rising. "My mother transferred it to—" "Me? No, she didn't," the banker replied. "In fact, I have a copy of a legal hold placed on the deed 2 months ago. Linda Mayfield is still the sole owner." Matthew came home rattled. Kayla, of course, didn't take it well. "You told me this house was ours," she hissed. "You promised me. I've spent thousands on renovations. Thousands." Matthew tried to explain, but there was nothing left to justify. He searched drawers, boxes, files, looking for a copy of a transfer that never existed. And that's when he found it. The letter, sealed, unopened, for Matthew. "Read only when I'm gone." He held it in his hands for a long time. Then, finally, he sat at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, and opened it. I can only imagine what it was like for him to read those words, to realize I had never been confused, never been weak, never been out of touch. I had been watching and planning, silently, carefully, lovingly. I had given him everything, my heart, my time, my home, and he had mistaken my silence for surrender. In that letter, I told him what I had never said aloud, that I had intended to leave him everything, that the $1.2 million I had carefully grown over decades, real estate, savings, investments, was meant to be his, until he showed me who he had become. I didn't write with anger. I wrote with clarity. I reminded him of the nights I stayed up during his college exams, the times I sold my jewelry so he could attend summer camps, the day I sat in my car crying because I couldn't afford new shoes for both of us. I told him, I forgave him for forgetting, but I could not reward cruelty. Instead, I left him a gift, $10,000, enough to restart. Enough to remind him I hadn't stopped loving him, only stopped sacrificing myself in the name of love. The rest, I wrote, had been repurposed to serve students in need, families in crisis, and a town that had loved me more honestly than my own child. That night, Matthew drank. He stood in the living room, surrounded by the sterile furniture he and Kayla had picked, and cried. Not for me, for what he had lost. Kayla didn't understand. So what? She's punishing you? Over money? No, he whispered, reading the last lines of my letter again. She was protecting it. From us. They argued. Loud, long. Neighbors heard. She called him weak. He called her cold. By morning, she was gone. I heard about it from Elaine, who still had a friend on the block. Kayla moved in with her sister. Said she's reassessing. I nodded slowly. And Matthew? Elaine shrugged. I imagine. He's reassessing too. A week later, I received a letter in my own mailbox. Handwritten, no return address. Mom, I read it. I read every word. And I don't even know where to begin. You were right. I was cruel. I was blind. I don't know how to undo it. I don't even know if I should try. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know, if you ever want to talk, I'll be here. There was no apology, not really, but there was something. I folded the letter and tucked it away in my nightstand drawer, not out of hope, not out of spite, but because even now, even after everything, he was still my son, and grief, I've learned, doesn't just live in loss. It lives in remembering what could have been. I heard from the school principal that the scholarship fund had already begun helping 3 students. One of them wrote me a letter. Dear Mrs. Mayfield, I don't know who you are, but I want to thank you. I'm the first in my family to ever attend college. Your kindness changed everything. That letter made me cry. Not from sadness, but from the quiet, blooming relief that something I built, something Robert and I dreamed of, was still growing. As Matthew stood in the empty echo of the house he tried to claim, I was planting new roots elsewhere, ones that would never be cut, down, stolen, or forgotten. While he unraveled, I was finally, fully becoming. They say truth sets you free, but no one warns you. It shatters first. For Matthew, that shattering came not just from the letter, but from what came after it. I had never told him what I was truly worth. That while I clipped coupons and wore the same winter coat for 12 years, I was quietly building something that could have carried his family into the next generation, and I would have given it to him freely. But instead, I left him a mirror, and in it, he saw himself. 2 weeks after Kayla left, I received a formal letter in a stamped envelope from a law firm downtown, his attempt to contest the will. It was filled with polite venom. Legal jargon cloaked in entitlement, words like unjust disinheritance and potential cognitive decline. But what he didn't know was that I had seen it coming. The trusts were sealed, the properties were protected, every account locked, under legal oversight. My will had been revised with full mental evaluations attached, reviewed by 2 independent attorneys and a physician. There was nothing for him to undo, nothing to take back, just consequences, catching up. The lawsuit fizzled in under a month. My lawyer sent me the final update with a handwritten note. He didn't even fight for you. He fought for what he thought he was owed, but the law knows the difference. Still, I couldn't help but feel the old ache in my ribs, that soft, sharp pain only a mother can carry, the guilt that clings even when you know you were right. That night, I sat alone on the porch of my cottage and watched the wind rustle the leaves like soft applause. I wasn't celebrating, but I was still. And in that stillness, something beautiful returned. Myself. Then came the unexpected. Elaine burst through my screen door one morning holding her phone. "Linda," she said, out of breath, "you need to see this." It was a Facebook post. Public. Tagged, already gaining traction. Matthew's younger cousin Jessica had written it. "It breaks my heart to see what happened to Aunt Linda. She gave up her life for that family, and they turned her into a ghost. And now that they know about the money, suddenly she matters again? Disgusting. She deserved better." Underneath were dozens of comments, some from people I knew, others from strangers. Most shared the same sentiment. She was the heart of that family. How did they forget that? Matthew had deleted his account by the next day. A few evenings. Later, a check arrived in the mail from the County Hospital Foundation. I didn't recognize the sender at first until I saw the note. "In honor of Kayla's brother, Ryan Taylor. Anonymous donor. Amount, $100,000. I smiled, just barely. Ryan had been diagnosed with MS 4 years earlier. Kayla and Matthew never lifted a finger to help him, always said they were too busy or dealing with their own problems. But I remembered him. Quiet, sweet, always polite to me. He once told me at Thanksgiving, "You're the only one who remembers my birthday, Aunt Linda." So I made the donation, quietly, anonymously, for a young man whose kindness deserved more than the shadows he was left in. It wasn't revenge. It was redirection. Later that week, I received a voicemail from Matthew. He didn't know I'd hear it, didn't know Elaine had transferred my old number to my new phone, just in case. His voice was softer, hushed. "Hi, Mom. I don't really know what to say. I know I ruined a lot, maybe everything. But I read your letter, all of it, and I think you were right. About me, about everything. I just wish I'd seen it before it cost me the only person who ever really stayed." He paused. "I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I don't know how to say that to your face yet, but maybe one day I will." The message ended. I listened once, then again, and then I deleted it. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need it to define me anymore. There's a myth that letting go means forgetting, but I remember everything. The warm weight of a baby on my chest. The scraped knees I kissed. The sound of my son's laughter echoing off hallway walls. And also, the silence when he closed the door on me. The look in his eyes when he decided I was more liability than love. I remember it all, but I carry it differently now. Not as baggage, as ballast. It keeps me steady when the past tries to pull me under. He lost the inheritance, but more than that, he lost the version of me that would have answered every call, forgiven every slight. And as I watched the cherry blossoms bloom again, I realized the most powerful thing I ever gave him was the chance to change. Whether he takes it is no longer my burden to bear. Spring came late that year. In the mornings, the wind still bit through the window panes of the cottage. But the cherry tree I'd planted in the side yard, grown from a graft of the old one Robert and I had raised, together had started to bloom. Soft white blossoms, curling open like shy hands. I sat on the porch, a wool blanket around my shoulders, a cup of tea in my lap, watching, listening, breathing. It had been 6 months since I left the house. 4 since the lawsuit died, 2 since the voicemail, and not one more word from Matthew, not a knock, not a card, not even a text. And I was at peace with that. Sometimes people ask me if I miss him, and the answer is, I miss the boy he was. the one who used to climb into bed with me when he had a nightmare, the one who once told his third-grade teacher, "My mom is stronger than the sun." But the man who stood in my kitchen and called my memories clutter? No, I don't. Miss that man. He's still living in that house, alone now, from what Elaine hears. He never did get another job in tech. Took something part-time at a logistics firm. Walks to work, comes home late, doesn't talk to neighbors. No one's sure if he even opens the curtains anymore. Sometimes, I wonder if he reads the letter again, if he traces the words with his finger, and tries to feel his way back to something he lost. But that's not mine to worry about anymore. The scholarship I created in Robert's name funded its first 5 recipients this spring. One of them, Clara, a shy girl from a small trailer home, sent me a handwritten note. "Mrs. Mayfield, I hope one day I can give someone what you gave me. You didn't just pay for school. You made me believe someone out there thought I mattered." "Thank you," I cried reading it. The kind of tears that come not from sadness, but from release. I never needed applause. But to know my life's work, my love, my sacrifices had landed somewhere soft and meaningful. That was more than enough. I also received a quiet thank you letter from the hospital after the Ryan Taylor donation. Apparently the money went toward building a new accessibility wing. They asked if I'd like my name engraved on a plaque. I declined. Some legacies don't need to be seen. They just need to work, to lift, to last. I did, however, accept one interview request. A small piece in the local paper featuring anonymous donors supporting education and healthcare. They didn't use my name, but they printed my words. Sometimes the people we give everything to are not the ones who carry our legacy forward. That's okay. A seed doesn't care where it lands. It just grows if you give it light. It went quietly viral. Mothers clipped it and taped it to their fridges. Church bulletins printed it in the margins. Strangers wrote me letters. I never responded. But I read everyone. And then, one crisp morning in May, I saw him. Matthew. He was standing on the other side of the street while I trimmed the rose bushes. He didn't wave, didn't call out, just watched. His eyes looked tired, older, softer. We held eye contact for a moment. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then turned and walked away. No scene, no apology, no request to come inside. And, still, I felt something shift. Not between us, but within me. I no longer needed him to say sorry. I just needed to know that somewhere inside him, the weight of it lived. Later that day, I wrote a letter. I didn't send it, didn't sign it. Just folded it and placed it in my dresser drawer. It read, "Matthew, I loved you before you ever said my name. I held your body before you knew what loss was. I don't know who you are now, but I know who I was, and I am proud of her. If you ever wish to meet her again, you know where the cherry tree blooms." The tree outside my cottage is taller now. Its blossoms stronger with each passing year. Children walk past and point to it. One even asked, "Is that a magic tree?" I smiled. "Yes," I said. "It remembers everything." If you had $1 million to leave behind, what would you do with it, and why? Let's talk in the comments. Your story could inspire someone else's second chance. He lost a house he never truly owned. I gained a life I never thought I could reclaim. And somewhere, in the quiet distance between us, truth bloomed where apology never did. It's funny how peace doesn't come in the ways you expect. You think it'll be a grand gesture, a tearful apology, some cinematic ending where the past is washed clean. But real peace? It's quieter. It's the moment you stop waiting for the door to open. It's when the silence no longer feels like punishment, but protection. I used to believe motherhood was about sacrifice, about giving until there was nothing left to give. But now, I think it's about something else. It's about teaching love. Not just feeling it, not just saying it. teaching it through example, through presence, through boundaries, and sometimes through letting go. There's a photograph on my nightstand now. It's not of Matthew. It's of me and Robert, 30 years ago, standing under that first cherry tree in full bloom. He's holding my hand. I'm laughing at something he whispered. It reminds me that I was someone before I was a mother. Before the disappointment, before the erasure, and I'm her again now. Maybe softer, maybe slower, but still whole. I walk every morning. Down the quiet road near the cottage, past the neighbors' gardens, past the bakery where the owner gives me free scones because I remind him of his grandmother. Sometimes I stop at the bench near the creek and watch the ducks move like a little orchestra. It's a simple life, but it's mine. No one hovers over me. No one edits me out of my own story. I water my plants. I read long books. I cook for one, and it's enough. I'm not lonely. I'm alone. There's a difference. Do I forgive him? Yes. But not so he feels better. So I can feel free. I forgive him for not knowing how to love me when it counted. I forgive him for confusing control with care. I forgive him for failing to see me as a person beyond my usefulness. But I do not invite him back into my life. Forgiveness is not the same as access. Some people may never apologize. Some wounds may never be acknowledged. But closure doesn't need both parties. Sometimes it's a one-woman ceremony, a private goodbye you whisper to yourself. To anyone watching this, if you've ever been discarded, forgotten, pushed to the edge by the very people you once made sacrifices for, please hear me. You are not worthless. You are not invisible. You are not a burden. You are allowed to begin again. You are allowed to hold on to your dignity even if no one else will. And you are allowed to choose peace over proximity, especially with those who only love you when you're easy to control. If I had to do it all again, I wouldn't change much. I would still love him, still raise him, still give him everything I had. But this time, I would hold a little more back for myself. Not out of selfishness, out of wisdom, because I've learned that even mothers must reserve a part of their soul that cannot be claimed, replaced, or rewritten. When I pass on, and that day will come, I don't want to be remembered for how much I gave. I want to be remembered for the quiet strength it took to take myself back, to walk away not because I was angry, but because I was finally ready to stop shrinking. So no, I didn't leave my son behind to punish him. I left to remember who I was before I forgot myself, and that, I've realized, is the most generous legacy of all. The cherry tree blooms every spring. It does not ask who stayed to see it. It simply blooms, because that is what it was born to do.